Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Zappsec Modernization Series. My name is Carl Schneider, Vice President at Zappsec, and I'm joined by Ray Garg, who is our Senior Identity and Access Management Architect. So, Ray, we now live in the age where it's completely routine for AI agents to call enterprise APIs autonomously, right? An agent deciding on its own to query a database, maybe update a record, or even initiate a payment. And in most enterprises, those agents authenticate with the same long-lived, broadly scoped tokens that were actually designed for human-driven integrations.
Yeah, it's such a good point. An agent now can make hundreds of API calls per second. Every one of those calls can execute with whatever permissions the token carries. So if that token is broadly scoped, then the agent has standing access to every resource in its permission set continuously and at machine speed. So that's a fundamentally different risk profile than a human operator who makes a few requests a minute.
Right, and the visibility gap compounds it, right? Because when something goes wrong, can you trace which agent made the call and under what authorization, or in response to what prompt? In most deployments, the agent authenticated once, and every action after that, it's invisible at the identity layer. There's no correlation between the prompt context and the downstream API call. So, what does the architecture look like when you design for this?
Right, right. So what we want to look at is the agent registering as a workload identity with the enterprise AI provider. So we can see what we have an enterprise AI agents layer at the top, registering with a verified workload identity into your layer like Okta, Auth0, Ping, and Entra. And then for each downstream resource, it performs a scoped token exchange. So it presents its identity token and it requests a resource specific access token that's constrained by things like audiences, scopes, and short lifetimes. So we can think of it like an airport gate pass system where the boarding pass gets you through security. And then at each gate, you receive a specific authorization for that flight or that's the seat, the departure. You don't get a master key to the terminal.
So every API call is governed by a purpose-bound token that expires quickly and can't be reused for some different resource.
Right, and the exchange is governed by a centralized policy decision point. So before the agent receives a scope token, the policy engine actually evaluates whether the agent for this task at this time should access that resource. So enforcement would happen at the API gateway, each or the resource server, each acting as a policy enforcement point that validates the audience, the scope, and the expiration before allowing that call.
Okay, so what are the operational considerations for that?
Well, token lifetime management is the most immediate, short-lived enough that a compromised token expires before broad exploitation, but not so short that the agent churns on exchanges. So the audience validation must be strict, replay protection, and prevents captured tokens from being reused. And all of this has to be logged for audit at scale.
Okay, but that sure sounds like governance overhead that most teams haven't planned for.
It is, but the alternative is agents with standing broad access at machine speed with no traceability and no mechanism for least privilege. And that is the default configuration in most early agent deployments.
Right, not theoretical. Like this is the identity as the control plane governing autonomous system behavior, not just who the agent is, but what it can do for how long and with what evidence trail.
Right. And AI systems should operate under identity governed token exchange. That's the key point here. We shouldn't have unrestricted machine credentials. That's the architectural principle that Zappsec provides when we plan for agentic workflows. We have a very well-defined approach for organizations that are building for AI and automated processes such as these.
Great point, Ray, because if your agents authenticate once and operate indefinitely with broad access, the question is not whether or not that creates exposure. It's actually a question of how much exposure exists today that you can't even see. But implementing that consistently across platforms and workloads is where most organizations struggle. So tell me how Zappsec is approaching that for organizations. What is the Zappsec secret sauce for designing the AI agent layer?
Yeah, so the challenge is not the token exchange pattern itself. The challenge is actually operating it at enterprise scale. We see most organizations are running multiple identity providers, they have multiple API gateways, and they have different workload environments. And without secure and automated coordination between each of those points, each team implements token handling differently, which creates gaps in policy enforcement and traceability. So Zappsec addresses that by introducing a shared identity services layer for autonomous workloads. So we can see the Zappsec token architecture control plane there. So we have frameworks that define the architectural patterns for workload identity and token design. We have blueprints that provide proven token exchange patterns that integrate across identity platforms, and automation that continuously evaluates token use, telemetry, and authorization decisions in real time.
Awesome. So instead of every team reinventing machine identity governance, the organization gets a consistent identity control plane across agents, APIs, and services.
Exactly. And the result is faster implementation, reduced custom engineering, and consistent policy enforcement across AI workloads and enterprise APIs. That's how organizations move from experimental AI access to identity governed autonomous systems operating safely at scale.
Yeah, and that's how you design the AI agent trust layer for autonomous systems. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget, Zappsec helps companies modernize their infrastructure to maximize the ROI and minimize the threats. We do cybersecurity every day. We've been there, we've done that. And if any of this resonates with you, we'd welcome a conversation on how to bring this sort of transformation to your organization. Visit zapsec.com or reach out to Ray or myself directly. Our email addresses are visible at the beginning of the video.